Hey. Welcome back to another Bible and Brekkie. We are excited to be here with some great friends. Missing Steven, of course, but happy to have Gabe and Brian back on us. So, guys, how are y'all doing? How's the Friday treating you so far?
So far, so good, man.
So far, so good. That's good. I know Brian's taking care of some father duties with his dog, so.
My bad. Just sending him to his bed, So he's
Mhm.
he's over here trying to get a word in.
I, we actually got some squeaky toys for our dogs because it was Zoe's birthday last Friday, so. They've managed to take the toy out, right? So here's a piece of it.
Wow.
It's always interesting when I think about it, right? Like we give these dog toys to the dogs that kind of like cry, and then we kind of train them to be killers in a way, right? If you think about it, because the more they squeak, the more they attack, right? And it's like until they rip out that thing, and I'm like, man, are we doing the right thing? I mean, but
Yeah. Just cry with a deeper sound. Maybe they won't.
yeah, maybe they
They won't
won't.
try to get you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's killer training, but awesome. Well, glad you guys are doing well. Today we're going continuing in the book of Hosea. We started last week on Hosea chapter 1 and had a really good conversation there, going into the Old Testament, into a minor prophet book. Obviously very interesting, different from what we've been covering in terms of the New Testament and other books, but we're continuing on this chapters 2 and 3 of Hosea. And so far, we saw how Hosea, the prophet, is called by God. And one of the first things that God calls him to do is to go and marry a prostitute or an adulterous or a promiscuous woman. And that is, obviously for very shocking when you hear it. But the point is just to have a real life illustration of the relationship that Israel and the people of God had with God and how they were promiscuous and adulterous in their relationship with God. So we're going to continue in this, how Hosea and God through Hosea will be speaking to Israel and just um, sharing his feelings to that. So we're just going to kick it off and go into the first verses here of chapter 2. And it starts off like this, very interestingly, right? We talked about this a little bit. Say of your brothers, my people, and your sisters, my loved one. Uh, Rebuke your mother, rebuke her, for she is not my wife, and I am not her husband. Let her remove the adulterous look from her face and the unfaithfulness from between her breasts. Otherwise, I will strip her naked and make her as bare as on the day she was born. I will make her like a desert, turn her into a parched land, and slay her with thirst. I will not show my love to her children because they are the children of adultery. Their mother has been unfaithful and has conceived them in disgrace. She said, I will go after my lovers, who give me my food and my water, my wool and my linen, my olive oil and my drink. Therefore, I will block her path with thorn bushes. I will wall her in so that she cannot find her way. She will chase after her lovers, but not catch them. She will look for them, but not find them. Then she will say, I will go back to my husband as at first, for then I was better off than now. She has not acknowledged that I was the one who gave her the grain, the new wine and oil, who lavished her on her the silver and gold, which they use for Baal. Therefore, I will take away my grain when it ripens, and my new wine when it is ready. I will take back my wool and my linen intended to cover her naked body. So now I will expose her lewdness before the eyes of her lovers. No one will take her out of my hands. I will stop all her celebrations, her yearly festivals, her new moons, her Sabbath days, all her appointed festivals. I will ruin her vines and her fig trees, which she said were hers, were her pay from her lovers. I will make them a thicket, and wild animals will devour them. I will punish her for the days she burned incense to the Baals. She decked herself with rings and jewelry and went after her lovers, but me she forgot, declares the Lord. But me she forgot. So a lot there, a lot to unpack, to say the least. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts, but the first thing that really jumps out is just the beginning of that, which I think is borrowed. Is that first verse 1, right? Which seems to be borrowed from the first section where God says, "Say of your brothers, my people, and of your sisters, my loved one." Which is interesting because if you look at chapter 1, Hosea names some of his children as not my people, Loami, and then names the other one Lo Ruhama, which is not loved. And here God is already starting to say, hey, all right, talk to those kids. And we kind of talked about the importance of names last week, but say to your brothers, my people, and your sisters, my loved ones. So he's kind of trying to change the narrative, I guess, in terms of the curses there. And then he kind of puts out what people would write is the covenant lawsuit, right? The charge against the Israel, right? The wife or the one that's in the wrong in this relationship with God, and goes through all the things that he's done and that she's done that has caused God. And I like that the end of that section here to really be painted like a vulnerable, wounded lover, right? At the end of it, he says, but it's me that she forgot. She's gone through left and right, chasing this other guy, thinking that this guy's providing what I've been giving to her. And now she's going to learn her lesson because I'm going to take away that because she's been unfaithful. And she's going to learn that it was me actually that was providing everything that she thought the other things around her were providing. So it really seems like it reminds me of kind of the Notebook, and I forgot his name. Is it Rose and Nick?
The main guy?
The main
Noah.
Noah.
Yeah.
What's her name? Rose?
Ellie.
Titanic.
Allie. It's
Allie.
Allie. So it's kind of like that, right? Where it's like you would look at him, he's like a hopeless romantic.
Too many day nights.
Yeah, too many. But it's like a hopeless romantic, right? Where he's like, literally building a home for her, doing all this for her, and she's just,
not paying attention
to it, or not really, understanding the love that she's receiving from him, and really going to other places to get filled.
And I think it's a good, analogy of just how the relationship between God and the nation of Israel was throughout history. When God takes him out of the land of Egypt and brings him to the land of Canaan, this passage of, the wine, the vineyards and all that, getting the new wine and all. She's thinking that she's getting this from her new lovers, but it's God. It's her husband, her lover, that's really the one that's been providing that. It reminds me of, when God tells the children of Israel, look, you're going to go into Canaan and you're going to pick, fruit from plants that you didn't put into the ground. Like, you didn't do any of the like, you're just taking the harvest. That's it. You didn't plant them. You didn't till the land. You didn't do any of that. I'm providing that for you. And of course, when the Israelites stood in the land of Canaan, they began to worship the gods of the land, and one in particular was Baal, right? The god who supposedly provides fertility, not just for, the woman, but also for the land to produce. So it's just an interesting dynamic here. There's some, callback to that, to the Exodus and to the entering into the promised land. But I do like that first verse there, the change of name from Lo Ami to Ami, and Lo Ruhama to Ruhama.
Right.
Just that God is, little by little changing the narrative.
Yeah.
The brothers and the sisters, right? I imagine, well, we often think, and we also see this in scripture, that God punishes, the second and to the second and third generation. But it seems like he's lifting the curses here.
Yeah.
Right. He's already, pulling that out. So God, in a sense, is, bringing about justice and really, people are going to reap what they sow. But also there's a lot of mercy being intertwined here.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good way to start off the charge that he's giving, right? The lawsuit that's being explained. As soon as it begins, there's already an element of mercy there.
Yeah. That's good. It reminds me of like when my dad would punish us. My mom was usually the enforcer, but my dad, he would, in the middle of it, he would crack a smile. He just couldn't keep a straight face, right? So in the midst of it, like when he was bringing the judgment, you could tell either by his eyes, the way his look, you know, he's like, he's just too loving, right? He just can't. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of like, I feel like there's these, you know, like, you know, when you have, you know, a crack somewhere and like light is seeping through some cracks or water is going, it's kind of like that, you know, God's trying to be like, hey, this is it. But he's still like, oh no, but you know, no, these are my people now. These are my, you know, my loved one. And it's interesting, like you said, right? It seems as though he's asking the children to rebuke their mother, right? So it's kind of that idea too, where the kids aren't really necessarily being punished, but they're just kind of, hey, keep your mom accountable, man, because she's not been faithful. Uh, and so, yeah, pretty
Well,
interesting, pretty interesting.
yeah, I think the verse that stood out to me, at least the harshest part for me on this, like, I don't know if you call it like some kind of condemnation or
Mhm.
whatever. I don't know. Is verse 11,
Hmm.
where it says, I will stop her celebrations, her yearly festivals, her new
Mhm.
moons,
Mm.
her Sabbath days. You know, I was like, dang, dude, like you're going to take all of that. Wow. Um, and, you know, to not get too much into like the Sabbath and its meaning, but also just like in the first few books of the Bible, you see how God establishes, right, for Israel all these different celebrations throughout the year, which basically like how they kept time was through parties, you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
and and God's like taking that away. He's saying all the things that you used to use for you to have this false sense of security, this false sense of worship, this
Mhm.
false sense of like, oh, you have a good relationship with
Yeah,
me.
that's good.
I'm stripping you from that because you don't have that. And it's actually blinding you to the fact that you don't have that.
Hmm.
And so it's good that, in a way, it's good that he does that. But at the same way, it's like, it's so sad that he has to take away something that he gave from like creation, you
Mhm.
know? So that's difficult to read. And also, as like you were reading this, you know, reading from, you know, now, like obviously we're not living back then.
Right, right.
I just think of like the New Testament story, right? The story that Jesus kind of says to illustrate what was going on during his time, which
Mhm.
is, you know, the prodigal son, right?
Hmm.
And I'm already waiting for this to kind of just like make a 180 turn
Right, right,
and
right, right.
got to go after, you know, the prodigal son in this case.
Mhm. That's good, and I think that, and obviously, I mean, that's, I guess, foreshadowing what's gonna come, which it will come, right? But I think that's just the beauty of having like the holistic view of the Bible and the whole narrative of the Bible, right? If you were just to read this and that's the only thing you're reading from the Bible and just stop at this part, you're like, yo, God seems you know, I don't know the whole story,
He
but
seems
because
insecure.
right, right, he seems insecure, he's acting in his feelings. But when you look at the whole narrative of the Bible and just how he is a God of love, our minds already are kind of, I guess if you want to say conditioned, but they're just used to, hey, I know the character of God, and there's at some point there's always going to be a return to grace, and like the father waiting for the prodigal son, always waiting there. So yeah, yeah, I love that. I love that. But what's very interesting is, yeah, he's very direct and saying, hey, look, you know, even though I am a gracious God, I do need to show you that you are in the wrong and you've hurt me, right? I think throughout Hosea, you'll see a God that is really hurt because he's, you know, all these like what you're saying, the parties, the festivals, all the things that they were doing, the celebrations. That it's very interesting, right? God gives us all these blessings and things, you know, to be able to enrich us, and then we take advantage of it either to hurt others, or it becomes just kind of a show or formality, which happened with what happens when Jesus shows up in the scene and in the New Testament, and he's like, yo, y'all think y'all doing everything, but you're not even remembering why you're doing everything you're doing, you know.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
for, and so he's like, I'm gonna, you know, he says it in different times, right? Isaiah, and I think even in Samuel when he's talking to Saul, right? It's like, you know, it's, I don't, God doesn't want sacrifices and all the and rigidity and rigidness and all this. He wants your heart and really you to be in the relationship, right? And I think it's kind of like when we think of modern day relationships, right? You can have someone that plays all the right roles, right? Shows up to the date, maybe, you know, brings in their part of whatever it is. But if you find that there's no connection, there's really no intimacy, there's really no, you know, heart to heart, you know, it's just a formality. It looks good in the pictures and Instagram. It's like, I don't want that, you know. I want someone that I can actually connect with and that's actually faithful, and not just for
Right.
the show to show that, oh look, oh their relationship looks good. No, no. I want, you know, when nobody's looking, how is our relationship really? And again, this goes back to that broken heart at the end of verse 13, right? She decked herself out with rings and jewelry, like literally, we think of some of the movies where why are you dressing up? Oh, I'm going out with some friends. And it's like, oh, okay. And she went after her lovers, right? And so he's like, but me, she forgot. So just a broken God that has done so much for her, as he's mentioned, right, in those verses. In verse 8, right, she has not acknowledged that I was the one who gave her the grain and the new wine and the oil. I lavished on her the silver and gold, which then they use for Baal, right? So it's not like the god of Baal, that which in pagan the other lands believed that they were the Baal god was the one that was giving them. God's like, no, I'm the one that gave this, and then they turn around and credit Baal for all the blessings that I've given them.
Right. I think what's powerful from the verse that Brian mentioned, verse 11, is that God is not just aware of, all the infidelity that is taking place with the, nation of Israel in relation to, him, but he is willing to set some boundaries. And he's gonna, take away the things that they might value, right? All the joyous occasions that they gather at the temple, and feasts and festivals, the new moons, the Sabbaths, all of that. And God's saying, like, no, I'm going to keep you at a distance because we have to make something right here. We have to right all the wrongs, and these are going to be the boundaries. And what God demonstrates here is a healthy way of dealing with conflict, like a super necessary decision that might cause some pain.
Yeah.
Obviously, in God's eyes, this is like more painful for him than for the nation of Israel. Like he's clearly the one that is lamenting the most because he has to make this decision, right? And he's the one that is being faithful, yet everything is, being thrown into his face while, he sees the nation of Israel consistently go after other gods and, bow down to other altars. So God is hurting, but he demonstrates a healthy way of dealing with conflict by putting these boundaries in place and saying, all right, we're not going to cross these lines anymore until, we figure out what needs to be righted, and so I really appreciate this particular verse here because God is willing to do what's necessary, right? We would think, no, like I have to go to the temple to worship,
right?
And God's saying, no, I'm gonna take that from you. I'm gonna take that from you. I'm going to deconstruct your entire faith completely, so that you can get down to what is essential and what is necessary. I think most of us would find that process very difficult to go through, but God initiates it. He's the one that starts it.
That's good. That's good.
I couldn't help but think pandemic while you were talking.
Yeah. Bro. I think that's a great example of, something unfortunate happening that causes us to, strip ourselves of like the glamour and the like grandioseness of, contemporary worship, right? Going into our fancy buildings with all the lights and sound systems and
false sense of community.
Yeah, false sense of community, false sense of proximity to not just one another, but to God. Like, no, and then all of a sudden having to worship at home, and do Sabbath in our backyard or in our living room. It's definitely a paradigm shift, and that's exactly what God is doing here with the nation of Israel.
Yeah.
Cutting them off, like you can't go to the temple, guys. Like
I know that,
not anymore. Not because like the temple guards are going to be guarding. No, because I'm going to take you to another land, and the temple
will be able. You have no option.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not going to have a temple to go to.
I think that also this section of the chapters I think as you get older, you see how explicit it actually is,
Mm-hmm.
because it's talking about, children that aren't the father's, children.
Yeah.
It's talking about her going and worshiping right at, these Baal whatever celebrations,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's just basically like what God is giving all the gifts, not only to her, but the way that He makes sure that she's taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else is abusing, and then God is kind of left with the broken pieces, trying to have a purpose and plan for
Mm-hmm.
things that He never intended to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and that's very difficult, I think, for us to understand. I think many times Christians, we love to hold on to this sense of like, um, uh, I don't know, there's always like some kind of purpose,
Mm-hmm.
right? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
this evil thing is
Mm-hmm.
happening. Oh, God has a purpose for this. It's like, and God's probably like, yo, I didn't even want that to happen. Like, you guys
Right.
made that happen, and now I have to come in and try to like, um, sorry, we're watching the show Loki, so now everything is like
Oh,
about like
no,
Loki.
no,
So now I'm trying to like draw a new line of things that need to happen within like this time continuum, and
You
no spoiler.
Calvinist.
No
yeah,
spoiler. No spoiler.
yeah, and it's just that sucks. That sucks for God. Like he has to do a bunch of extra things that he really wouldn't have to do if we just kind of like, all right, God, like you lead me, I'll be
Yeah.
faithful, because like I look around and I have so much. Like why would I not be faithful to you? And I
Mm-hmm.
think we kind of fall into the same trap as Israel, in the sense that, oh, oh, look at what I have. I have a nice apartment, I have stuff,
Mm-hmm.
things that I care about or whatever that I bought with, oh, my own money, because I work and I get paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
But really, like, who's the one that,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, if I really look at my life, who's the one that actually provided these things for me?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I think Israel grew blind to those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. I think of also like, yeah, that's powerful. Like how God in this whole grand scheme of things, he loses out the most, I think, of everyone. Because he ends up losing his life, right? And when he comes. But and just the pain that he has to go, thousands of years and heartbreak and misunderstanding. But also too, like the struggle of knowing that you have the best for someone and then they don't accept you or want you, right? Or they don't want that best thing. So I'm sure it's something that sometimes parents go through with their kids,
Yeah, I'm
or
sure.
teachers with students, any term of like kind of relationship like that, where like, hey, I know this is, at least in my view, this is what's best for you, and I can see that the track you're going down is going to lead to more pain and disillusionment, and you're not going to be happy. um but sometimes you need to be like, hey, all right, that's what you want to do, I'm going to let you do it. And we see, kind of like you're saying, Gabe, right? Very very beautifully too, just God making those boundaries. We're saying, hey, I can't force you,
Yeah.
and I can't make you do this, and so it hurts me to allow you to do this, but I'm going to allow you to go through this. And me withdrawing my protection means that you're going to be susceptible to other attacks and stuff. Um so yeah, I think it's a painful, hard thing too for God, knowing that he has the best for everyone here on earth, but he can't choose it or force it for everyone. It's kind of hard there. but
Yep.
but yeah, so we continue here in the part here. Oh, I gotta go down. And this is what kind of the turning point, right? Where God's already kind of given this is what's going on. And then in verse 14, he says, therefore, I am now going to allure her, or to romance her, or woo her, and I will lead her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her. There I will give her back her vineyards. I will make the valley of Achor a door of hope, and there she will respond as in the days of her youth, as in the days she came up out of Egypt. In that day, declares the Lord, you will call me my husband. You will no longer call me my master. Very romantic language here. I will remove the names of the Baals from her lips, and no longer will their names be invoked. In that day, I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, the birds in the sky, and the creatures that move along the ground. Bow and sword and battle I will abolish from the land, so that all may lie down in safety. I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you in righteousness and justice and love and compassion. I will betroth you in faithfulness, and you will acknowledge the Lord. In that day I will respond, declares the Lord. I will respond to the skies, and they will respond to the earth, and earth will respond to the grain, and the new wine, and the olive oil, and they will respond to Jezreel. I will plant her for myself in the land. I will show my love to you, the one I called not my loved one. And I will say to those called not my people, you are my people. And they will say, you are my God. Man, beautiful, man. There's the resolution there, right? Of just, it seems you're going down a dark, terrible ending, no fairy tale ending, no happy ending. And then all of a sudden he's like, hey, I'm going to do my best to romance her and lead her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her. Right. So very romantic.
Right. I think of the hymn, man, in the garden. I don't know if you know that.
And he walks with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he talks with me and he tells me I am his own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the
imagery,
the image that I get reading this verse. And then I love verse 15. Then I will give her vineyards from there, and the valley of Achor I will make as a door of hope. And that word Achor in Hebrew is valley of trouble. So the valley of trouble is going to become a door of hope. And so, it's this grand reversal that God, is doing here with the relationship that he has with his children, the children of Israel. There's a lot here to
a lot. Yeah,
there's a play with the names here in verse 16. And it will come about on that day that you will call me my husband and no longer call me my master or my Baal. The word there apparently being used for Hebrew for husband is similar to the same exact word being used for master. And so that kind of gives you a good idea of what happens with, in human psychology. You can go from take it from that route. Often we imagine God to be like, the worst thing that we've done, right? And we imagine God to, treat us in the same manner as, the false gods, right, that they were worshiping, right. Because that's all they know, that's what's tangible and real to them. And so in this relationship, they would associate God with that kind of anger and just, toxicness, and God is going to treat them the same way the Baals would treat them. Therefore, that's how they imagine God. That's how they're going to call God, right? The master or Baal. But God is so tender and different and loving. He's like, look, no longer are you going to confuse me. Yeah, you're not going to call me by that name. You're going to call me my husband, right? So there's a neat play of words there in verse 16, and it just goes to show how different and distinct God is from the false idols that they were worshiping and the images that they were rendering their allegiance to.
That's good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that verse 16 is like just a result of, or what God hopes to be a result of, verse 15. Verse 14, where he's just like, listen, I'm going to take you from where you are. I'm going to take you to the wilderness because there's nobody there. Yeah. So you're going to know for a fact that no one else is giving you this stuff. No one else is making your vineyards grow. It's me, And from there kind of spark this like relationship again where she doesn't see, God as just another God, but as, you know, her husband, because there's that like relational aspect that
Mhm.
was lacking before, you know,
Mhm.
and that no celebration, no Sabbath could give them that relational connection. It's like that time spent alone together for a moment. And I love it
Yeah.
because it's kind of like, um, that isn't like the end of it all. He's just like, listen, I'm pulling you out into this wilderness now so that we can grow together. And then I'm planting you right back. You know,
Mhm.
I think for the most part, especially you see this in churches, right, where our leaders, and partly this is just the the culture of our churches may kind of like inspire this to happen, where there's a lot of burnout. And typically, when there's burnout, we're just like, all right, I'm done. I'm never leading again. I'm just going to come and sit on this pew. And like, probably maybe, you know, if you did have a lot of volunteers in the past, maybe 50% of your church, it's just a lot of people that are burned out, just sitting
Mhm.
down, not wanting to do much anymore. And I think this is like so refreshing to hear, as you know, as a leader, to be able to say, hey, you know, when things perhaps haven't turned out, when I have relied on my own strength and on my own capabilities to kind of see me through, um, I have made other things, right, my priority and not necessarily my relationship with God.
Mhm.
Here I am in this desert to be made anew so that I
Mhm.
can go back
Mhm.
and be better than I ever was on my own terms,
Mm.
you know? And I think that that is a beautiful like calling, or whatever you want to, you know, say that it is to us or to me, that says, you know, hey, you know, I do want you to flourish. And in that flourishing, um, I want you to kind of be the tool that I use to reverse what I had said in the beginning. And what he had said, right, to Hosea was like, hey, this son is going to be called like, you know, not mine, right? And this other son of yours is going to be called something else, right? He
Yeah.
had like a son, a daughter, and then a son, something like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
basically, in like the last verse, he's like, "Yeah, you know that daughter that I named that I don't love. Well, guess what? I'm going to tell her that I love her. And that son that I
Mhm.
named, like, yo, you're not mine. You're not of my people. You are my people. You know.
Yeah.
So I think in the long run, God, you know, makes a purpose for something that he never perhaps intended to happen. And it's really lovely to see at the end of this chapter that, um, with this, I guess, I don't know if you would say like chastisement of Israel,
Yeah.
uh, you see a renewal not only of Israel, but those who kind of like Israel has hurt,
Mhm.
just all become part of God's people and kind of grow and flourish
Yeah.
together, which is
That's
really
good.
cool.
Mm.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. It's interesting too, in just all this, how he chooses to take her to the wilderness, right? So like this, I don't know, maybe some advice, practical relationship advice, right? If you feel like you're not seen, you know, maybe it's not, you're not at the point where there's unfaithfulness in the relationship, but there's some disconnect. The importance of just taking a moment and just getting out and saying, all right, we got to really get
Yeah,
away for a moment. You don't have to
yeah.
go to the wilderness literally, but
Well,
Right.
you know what's weird, Seba, though, is like the wilderness didn't work out the first time. You
right.
know,
Well, yeah, and it's
it didn't
interesting
really
because it
make the
alludes back.
people love God the first time. Like,
Right,
why would he do it now?
right. Yeah.
You know, what makes it different now?
Yeah, and
Mm.
but yeah, I do like that point though. Like you're saying, right? It's kind of like why he chose the promised land, right? Which really wasn't. It was more his presence that made it such a rich and fertile land that made people like, wow, what's up with these Israelites? Like they're in the middle of this place that and they have like milk and honey, right? It's just flowing with all that. But yeah, it's interesting, right? It goes back to that Exodus account of the people of Israel going to the wilderness and not really going according to plan. And here he's like, I need to take you away, as he does with like Moses, right? He goes, hey, he has to go to the wilderness for a while just to reteach him things. But just to have that private one-on-one time together.
Can I sound like really, really dark and nothing against
Uh-oh.
like older people, right? So like the first time it seemed like they were just going around for 40 years waiting for like that whole generation to die
Yeah.
and work with like the new people, which still didn't work out that great. But it's like, is that the process of like God pruning, Israel? I'm just like wondering, like, I know it sounds dark
Yeah.
as heck, but I'm just, I'm trying to compare the two instances, and what is the difference here? What's going to make this such a success that compared to the first time?
I wonder what God has in mind when he mentions this wilderness experience.
Yeah.
What is he talking about? Is he talking about like exile?
Right.
Like,
That's
how
true. What is this actual
how
wilderness?
alike is this wilderness experience going to be to the first one? When Israel was coming out of Egypt. So what exactly is this wilderness gonna be like? Is this like a spiritual, ethereal, experience, or this is gonna be like like physically being displaced
Right.
into a deserted area, or just being away from the presence of God in his temple and his sanctuary, that you feel like you're in a wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
So like, what does God have in mind here?
I think in any case, there's like that correlation where they weren't supposed to be wandering in the desert to begin with. It was like a straight shot, and their mistakes made them wander in the desert, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so, or like their distrust and disloyalty, which again is like the same thing that's happening now. It's like, you leave me no choice but to take you into a deserted place, whether that be spiritually, physically, whatever.
Right.
And I think that many times we leave God with no choice, and we find ourselves in the desert. We're like, why, God, why? It's like, God's like, listen, bro, like look at yourself for a moment, check yourself, because you're asking for all these reasons why, and it could be, you got to fix some things,
Yeah.
or at least let me fix some things.
Right. I like that. Yeah, and it's interesting because it's always to redeem the person, right? That's always the goal at the end of it. It's not just to punish them, but just to be like, hey, look, your course of life, like the way you're going, you're gonna end up in a worse place. So hopefully this is a wake up call for you. Yeah, that's good. That's good. And going to that, just ending this part right here, this chapter, right? I'm gonna show my love to the one I called not my loved one. I would say to those called not my people, you are my people, as you said, Brian, and just that beautiful reversal there of, just how, Israel hearing this story, they could have been like, man, this sucks, man. The name of those kids, that's every day hearing, you're not loved. It's like, oh man, or you're not my children, my people. And here God saying, no, we're going to reverse that. And though you deserve to not be loved and not my people, I'm going to love you and you'll be my people. And so then we continue there in chapter 3, and it's very short, chapter 3, going to the present with what's going on with Hosea. Let me just see if I can. And so we hear here, and Hosea writes, the Lord said to me, go show your love to your wife again, though she is loved by another man and is an adulteress. Love her as the Lord loves the Israelites, though they turn to other gods and love the sacred raisin cakes. Those cakes, man. So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and about a homer and a lethek of barley. Then I told her, you are to live with me many days. You must not be a prostitute or be intimate with any man, and I will behave the same way towards you. For the Israelites will live many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred stones, without ephod or household gods. Afterward, the Israelites will return and seek their Lord, the Lord their God. Huh? Oh, seek the Lord their God and David their king. They will come trembling to the Lord and to his blessings in the last days. Yeah.
So it seems like God had in mind some exile. Some exile. That's what he.
Yeah, some kind of destruction of all their religious,
everything. Their social life.
Symbols. Yeah. So it's like when you're left with nothing, who are you gonna call?
Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And that's often the experience, for most people. I mean, it sounds super, very superficial. It's when you have nothing that you realize that God is your everything. But that's essentially, what God is doing here. But he's not just stripping back the social economic foundations of the Israelites. Like, he's taking away their religion as well,
just their temple, their identity, just like
everything that they had,
mm-hmm.
Some, I guess, attachment to, that gave them a sense of purpose, a sense of identity, as you said. God takes it away. He strips it completely down.
Yeah. And it reminds me of just, what we would call the intertestamental period, right, between the last book written and then the Gospels, in that time when, it kind of seems like that, going into the exile, that's kind of the last time they hear from God. And it's like, they have, as it says, they have a king, they don't have a prince, they have other kings that are put as, by the governing powers like Babylon and others that are overseeing them, but none like what they had before with King David and Solomon and whatnot. But they're without sacrifice, no sacred stones. They're not having any communication with God for 400, at least, for those 400 years. That's the last message of the prophets. And then just afterward, that beautiful promise that they will return and seek the Lord, like when they turn from their ways, and they will come to the Lord and to his blessings in the last days. So I don't know if it's pointing necessarily to the last days, or more to the day of the coming Messiah. That's like, okay, this is when God, Jesus shows up into the scene and says, "Hey, these are what, I know there's been silence from God for the last hundreds of years, but now this is what God actually thinks about you," which goes in line with what we've been seeing here. It's the God of love. Going to that verse 19 and 20 in chapter 2, right? He's righteousness and justice and love and compassion.
Right. Right.
So yeah, it definitely exiles in the recipe for success, for and just a time where, because of their actions, there's just this lack of connection and communication from God. But I thought it was interesting in verse 1, right? Going back to Hosea's life. Now we're taking a little break, and now we're going back to what's going on with Hosea. And it's it's a word of God comes to him, just like it did in the beginning, and says, "Hey." The beginning says, "Go love them, go marry a promiscuous woman." And here it's like, "Hey, go show your love to your wife again," right? It seems like maybe she left the house or something. And though she is loved by another man. And I found it interesting, right? This is a scholar slip up. I haven't read anything or anyone that maybe it's not a big deal, but I thought interesting the word that Hosea uses to describe man is not just like the normal Hebrew ish, which is just like, man or isha, woman, but it's actually ra'ah, which is it's usually friend, companion, or fellow. So I wonder, I don't know if I'm reading into it, but I wonder if, knowing that she's just going around, right, just and just in her promiscuity, even being loved by someone that he's familiar with or knows to some extent, which just puts it in a whole nother, it's just
like your friend, bro. You're like best friend.
Can you imagine that? Hey, God's like, hey, she's literally being loved right now by one of your friends or someone that you know,
right?
And she is an adulteress. Like, this is who she is. But love her as I love the Israelites, though they turn to other gods, and though they love their sacred. When the raisin cakes, from what I was told by a teacher when I was asking, like, why make a big deal, was because that's what they would eat in the temples when they would have, the worship for other gods, and there was a lot of sexual activity happening in those temples to, I guess you would say, to turn on the gods that were watching, to have them bless and, Baal and infertility and all that. So it was just part of these. So they're, so it's a very deep and profound thing where God's like, I'm literally aware of what you're doing, but here I am still going out after you to love you. And just for Hosea to have to swallow his pride and I don't know, people would say dignity and stuff, to be like, that's tough.
So we can serve raisin cakes at potluck then. So this has nothing to do with, raisin cake. I like raisin. No, I don't know anyone who has any,
the raisin cakes
problem against raisin cakes or or anything like that. I'm
That's
just
true.
making a joke.
But
I can
yeah.
see someone saying, "Look, Pastor, we're not allowed to eat
We
raisins."
can't eat raisins anymore because of
Yeah,
what they did back in Hosea's time.
I feel like this chapter, like Hosea should just stop writing, bro. This is it. Like you've ended on a good note, you know.
Really has, yeah.
Coming back to, you know, the King of David and just like this you know, turnaround story, but of course, you know, doesn't end there.
Still have like
Yeah,
a couple more.
I'm just wondering, like, who did he have to buy her from? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and like, you guys were married. What did she go and do that made her be the property of someone or something else? And
Yeah.
like with what we read, I just feel like maybe it's like one of those temples that own her or something.
Could
You
be,
know,
yeah.
that she's kind of used for these moments
Right.
of you know, worship to
Right.
these gods, or I
Mhm,
honestly don't know. That's the only thing that makes sense to me, like where he would go and buy her from.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's
Um,
a good point.
and maybe they're like, oh, you know, you can't take your wife unless you give some kind of, you know, offering
Mm,
to this like institution or something. You know what I'm saying?
right.
Yeah.
At least that's what I imagine. That I'm not saying that's what the text says, but that's what I imagine happened. Like maybe he went and bought her like out of slave thing, or I don't know.
It could be that she sold herself back into, you know,
Maybe there was like
that
a
lifestyle,
right.
like a pimp.
Yeah,
I don't know
I
what
was gonna say,
the
yeah,
word is,
yeah.
but
That
I
that's
mean,
true too.
men have been taking advantage of women since the beginning of time. So there was probably something like that that was associated with a religion. You know,
Mhm.
they probably had a temple, you know, and such. So it's probably
It may have been a fellow like
happened.
the
Friend,
leader of that temple, right? That he was acquainted with. That was maybe a temple for Baal. That's why, you know, say, hey, I thought you were a friend. And, you know, we were kind of religious men together. I don't know. That's really reading
yeah, it's a
into
lot
it,
of
but
speculation.
a
But I
lot of
mean,
speculation. But I mean,
Yeah.
it is crazy for me, right? That he pay, you know, it seems he pays a good amount, right? You know, it's about 6 ounces of silver, but then the weight of the barley that he gives is 430 pounds, right? And so
That's
we
a
kind of
lot of
talked about
barley.
barley when we were talking with about Ruth, right? I'm trying to remember what remember it was like a whole day's wage that was
yeah,
given
I don't
and that
remember.
she picked up,
But do
but
you guys remember how many pieces of silver Joseph or Jesus was given over for?
30.
30.
it
Yeah.
was
So
30
half
or
as much.
15?
I mean, this is half as much than that.
Half the silver, but there's a lot of barley.
Yeah.
A lot of
That's
barley, yeah.
He's like, yo, there's all the silver I got. Let me
I
give you
got
something.
I got these sandals as well. You can take these.
So Ruth in Ruth 2:17, she gleaned the field until evening, then she threshed the barley. It amounted to about an ephah, which was around 30 pounds of barley. So that's a whole day.
And how much
Yeah,
barley was it again?
430
450.
pounds.
Oh,
Whew.
430. Damn.
So that's like if she can get, and she was being you know, graciously blessed too, and she's getting what, 30 pounds on a one day. Yeah, man, that's
How's our math, guys?
let's just say you can get 30 pounds,
3,
30
6,
30
9.
pounds
It's
per
probably
day.
like somewhere between 10 and 12 days of labor.
43, 3 into, yeah, 3 into 43 is what. And he wasn't a harvester, right? Like he's just a prophet.
He's probably not even a well-liked prophet, so who knows how
Yeah,
much
exactly.
profit
Yeah,
he
I mean,
got.
yeah, people. Yeah, he's like, I'm not gonna get. So where'd he get? Yeah, but that's what's crazy, right? Which is kind of the moral, the point of God too, where he said, hey, you were already my wife. Like, why do I have to pay for my wife? Like, we've already gotten married. This is my wife. And it seems, again, like you were saying, Brian, like it just seems it doesn't make sense that he would have to go out. And maybe she willingly went out and then she sold herself back, or they, you know, they ended up buying. So they're like, hey, no, she's working for us now. So if you want, you got to pay her exit out. Like you got to pay what she would usually pay, you know, get us money, which is
Yeah.
X amount.
It definitely seems like when it's convenient for them, women have power to kind of like sell themselves or whatever.
Yeah.
instead of having like the permission from like the man of
Mhm.
the house, um, which is interesting. It's like, yeah, we're very like uh what's it called when like you have the man be the head of everything? I
Machista.
forget the term.
Patriarchal.
Yeah, we're very patriarchal about everything unless
Mhm.
it's like benefits me, in which case, oh
Right.
no, oh yeah, the woman can sell herself, no
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps, this is also like a shadow of what's to come, right? Christ paying the ransom.
Right.
Mhm.
Like, why should he have to pay if she was already his? But, that's how infidelity works,
Mhm.
And so
There's a price to be
Jesus,
paid now.
Jesus comes and he pays the price, and,
Mhm.
and he takes her back.
No, that's good.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's good.
which makes sense, like how in Job, like he's like, oh, the earth was kind of given to me or whatever. And it's like, dang, I have to buy this back from this guy who just kind of took it,
Yeah.
without. Yeah, it's weird because if the word there for man is friend, then it's like, why wouldn't his friend be like, hey, listen, you need to go back to, Hosea?
Right.
His friend
Yeah.
is messed up.
And I mean, obviously, a lot of speculation, but yeah, it's just interesting to see if she's in actually under a what would the word be, like a harem, right, under an actual kind of place where they're where there's like a pimp. Well, I guess that's the only word we can think of right now that's kind of leading that, or if it's actually part of a religious structure and system, that a church
Yeah,
that but needless to say, yeah, it's a very sticky situation, and he has a very public profile, right? So it's just he's probably known as the
she probably has a very public profile
she
too.
probably does, yeah, she's probably well known too. But it's cool, like it's just that kind of the vows here, right, that he tells her in verse 3. He's like, hey, you're gonna live with me many days. And you must not be a prostitute or be intimate with any man, and I will behave the same way towards you. So it's kind of like this covenant that he's making, that he's already been faithful, but he's reestablishing this covenant, kind of like what God does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And he's like, I've always been faithful, but I'm just gonna. And it reminds me of kind of the Ten Commandments, where the idea that I've heard presented to, instead of thinking of like, oh, you do not have this or don't do this, it's like, hey, you don't have to have other gods, you don't have to steal, you don't have to, just the language is more of like, because God is providing everything, you don't have to go out and do this, you don't have to sell your body, because I'm going to provide everything that you need, and I'm going to take care of our family and do that. And so he's establishing the covenant that he never broke with his wife that broke it probably multiple times, and
Right.
again, illuminating just how this reminds us of God, who does the same with us.
yeah, and I like how it kind of ends because like verse 4 is like, oh, they'll live many days without king or prince, sacrifice, sacred stones, ephod, or household gods, which are all
Hmm.
things that they make, all things that they have
Hmm.
power to do themselves.
Yeah.
um and he's like, okay, you're going to live without all these things that you yourself do, and once you get rid of these things, you're going to come to a place where you realize, okay, God is what matters, not all these things that I'm able to do, or willing to give.
Hmm.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty good. Yeah. Again, I mean, I wouldn't want to be in Hosea's shoes. That's a tough.
Yeah.
When you received your call to ministry, I don't think we thought about that being part of our call to ministry.
Well,
But
he didn't say that when he called me. Apparently
yeah,
Hosea
yeah.
Maybe, God does that just in different ways. He might send you to like the worst church
Uh oh.
ever,
Uh oh. Uh oh. So
that
with that, before we say something we'll get in trouble for saying, we're gonna go into a lightning round. No, it's yeah. We have different the cult ministries, different things that God does. But first of all, just our thoughts. I mean, we were talking about it earlier, um, the Miami building that collapsed. Um, Kind of crazy. I just found out about it yesterday. Someone brought it up to my attention, and I was like, man, it's just crazy. Yeah,
Yeah,
crazy
there's
to
still
think of
people
how.
that haven't been found, so they literally put 90 plus people on the missing list,
Hmm.
you know and some people that live together, like one of them is found and survived, and is at a hospital, but like their family hasn't been found, which is just like it's so weird. It's hard to explain, and you just try to find someone to, after all the hurt and the stress, then you try to find someone to blame.
Mm,
uh, and yeah, there's a lot of people hurting right now.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, right now, what I'm reading is at least 4 people dead and 159 missing, which is
Yeah.
just a lot of people, man. That's just so. Our hearts are with the families and yeah, everyone. I mean, everyone looking for answers. Like, how could this building just randomly collapse, um, in the middle of a night like that? And so, yeah. And the more time passes, obviously, the harder, I guess, yeah, the sadder the news. But awesome. All right, moving on to maybe a little more upbeat news here. What are your predictions on the NBA Conference Finals? Right now, we have the Suns and Clippers. Clippers won last night, so they have the series 2-1, and then Hawks. I know Garrison Hayes is extremely happy. The Hawks beat Milwaukee for their first game, so they're 1-0 right now. I think they play tonight. But predictions on those and who makes the finals?
I think Milwaukee and Atlanta goes to 6 games. I think Milwaukee takes it. I think Phoenix is going to close out against LA as well. So I think it's going to be Phoenix versus Milwaukee
Okay.
in the NBA Finals. That's my prediction.
Phoenix, Milwaukee. Okay.
Just based on off of what I've seen from both teams and the teams that are left as well. Atlanta's a really good team.
Yeah.
They were definitely underestimated throughout the entire season
Yeah.
and into these playoffs as well. They had a tough road going against the Knicks. My Knicks, and they beat us, man. They were the better team.
Good series.
And then they did the same against Philadelphia, which was an even tougher team to go against. So they've done and looked great so far these playoffs. Trae Young has been just ice cold, man. He's been just nasty.
Yeah.
48 points in game 1. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so young too. So I think Milwaukee has the edge here in this series. I think they're gonna bounce back and they'll win. And Phoenix just looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
Booker, and then now that Chris Paul's back, he didn't look too good last night, but
I think
he'll find his rhythm again, and I think they're going to close out the series in 5 games. So,
No, I agree.
Yeah. So I don't know anything but Suns all the way. That's what I'm looking for. That's why I'm rooting for the Suns. I was rooting for the Nuggets before, just because I didn't think they were gonna do much, but they had one Argentine player, so it's like, all right, that's my team. But they got swept in a couple rounds ago. Yeah, so I guess the Suns.
Let's go Phoenix.
I hope so. I mean, like we said last time, I'm just gonna put it up. Anyone but the Clips.
Yeah, bro.
Anyone but the Clippers, man.
I don't like the Clippers. It's nothing against the organization. I just don't like
their players.
The players. I just don't like Patrick Beverly. I don't like Paul George. I'm okay with Kawhi. I just think Paul George is not a good player. He played well last night, but playoff P, man, he's that game 1, he missed like 2 key free throws.
Yeah.
Game two.
Yeah.
Sorry. 2 key free throws. He missed them, and then Phoenix came and last couple seconds, and they won the game.
Yeah. No, I'm the same. Yeah, I want Suns, and I don't know. I might say Hawks, man, just because, just to make Garrison happy. I'll say Hawks. They're very confident, and I think they don't have as much to lose. Milwaukee has, they're kind of the favorites, so there's that pressure of like, this is it. Like, you got to do it, and Trae Young is very very confident, but he backs it up because he plays really well. And so
Yeah.
we'll see, man. But yeah, I think we'll see. Well, I'm going with the Suns Hawks. The surprising upset.
It's
You
a
never
cool
know.
4 teams. It's a very. I don't think anybody at the beginning of the season predicted
Yeah.
any of these 4 teams would be in the conference finals. So it's pretty cool. It's good for basketball.
It is, yeah.
Uh,
As much as we don't like it, but yeah, it's good for basketball. All right, last one. Loki reaction so far without spoiling this week's episode because I haven't watched it yet. But so far, thoughts?
It's pretty good.
Pretty
it
good.
is a
Masterpiece. No.
It is a no. Listen, in
Do you
terms
like
of
it?
all like the
The
shows.
let's say compared to the last two, to WandaVision and
Okay,
Captain
so
Falcon.
I would say WandaVision was the standard.
Mhm.
Was it the Falcon and the Winter Soldier? I liked it. It was really good. Wasn't my cup of tea. I just liked WandaVision a lot better. I think Loki is closer to the standard than like it's really good, especially if you if you're familiar with like theological themes of predestination, Calvinism and Arminianism and such, and then also like theodicy as well. There's so many deep themes that Loki is working with. It's really good. It's a great show, and of course the actors are amazing as well.
Yeah, they're very good.
Yeah.
Tom Hiddleston is.
I did have a conversation about like Marvel and like all these superhero movies and things like that with with Caleb, which is Lafitte's son.
Yeah.
And he was he made actually an interesting point that something that these movies are doing, which him as a fan doesn't like, and I could see why, is like they're trying to make like people that are evil in the comics like more relatable, and like, oh, he's not as evil, and he's like, nah, bro, like in the comics this person's evil and that's the way it should be. Which I guess like for me, who I don't really read the comics, I just watch the movies and stuff like that, it's like, oh, this is really cool. But I could see how for like a person who is actually like spends time and like has kind of grown up with these superheroes and villains, it's like, why are you making the villain good? So I could see how maybe these movies aren't that great.
Especially if you know the comics and the whole background.
But for me, who as an ignorant follower of superheroes, I could say like, yo, this is pretty good. And with all the superheroes, there's so many things that you can tie in with like religion and scripture that you're like, wow, like this is really close to the things that we've had to study.
I want to say that could be true. I'm not like an avid reader of the comics, nor have I ever been. But I want to say that the portrayal in the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been more realistic. Like it's closer to reality than it is to fiction. And I get why people want it to be more like the comic books, because it is more, fictional than anything. That, the world is more black and white in that world than in our world, where things kind of are gray and you don't know. And I think the MCU's portrayal of Loki has been more like what it is in real life. There's a quote in the second episode, Seb, I don't know if you've seen it yet.
I haven't watched the third
one. But where Loki is sitting down with I forget who it is, but essentially they're in a conversation and they're talking about the nature of good and evil, and Loki in conversation says, no one good is truly good, and no one who is evil is truly evil. And like that has such a profound meaning to it, because that's what we find in the Bible. Good people, like the best holiest people that we can think of, and whether in the the canon of scripture or historically, like Martin Luther King Jr., like these people who were just anointed by the Spirit. None of them were like truly to their core, to their essence good.
Right.
And then no one who's true like evil is truly evil.
Right.
So yeah, that's an interesting theme, and I think that's closer to reality than the comics would be. So that's kind of why I like it.
Yeah. I can see both sides though. Now that I had that conversation, I was like, oh
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah.
Maybe they should make it evident, based on Marvel.
Based
It's like it's not
loosely
real,
on,
like based on a true story, but they like completely like
No.
make the
rewrite
whole
a
thing
little bit.
super dramatic.
Yeah. It's gonna depict the comic books according to the creative director of the show, or the MCU. So but great show. It's been really good so far.
It's been interesting, right? Like going to the thing that I have kind of thought was interesting, just like the theology of the show, I guess, if you wanted to say theology, but just as you were saying, right, how everything's set in stone, and these guys are, if you haven't seen it, they're guarding the timeline and making sure everything falls into place, right? So it's interesting seeing how different worldviews play out, and then the repercussions that worldview or understanding of how life works really affects everything else. So it's been interesting, but good show. Yeah, I've enjoyed the last three. They've been really good. Obviously tackling different types of topics and themes, but yeah, good. So shout out to Marvel giving us conversation. Well, awesome, guys. Thanks for joining us. Hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you all next time. Peace.